So we're here in Istanbul today, and I'm very lucky today to have met Dr. Ramzy Baroud again, one of my heroes, one of the legends, the Palestinian journalist who have been working on Palestine for the past 25, 30 years.
Yes, about that.
I
Yeah.
have to admit, you have always been one of my role models in
That means
media.
a lot, Ahmed.
And I remember when you joined We Are Not Numbers as a mentor, I would really enjoy listening to your lectures. So thank you very much for agreeing to speak to me.
I thank you for having me. Always pleasure, Ahmed.
Thank you. So, Doctor, during the past 20 or 25 years, you have been talking a lot about the necessity of putting the Palestinian narrative at front and center. And I don't want to say that finally we're here. Maybe we're not. But the Palestinian narrative in the West has changed, and we could say that we're getting better, much better. The Palestinian voices are now front and center in the West.
Absolutely.
But I want to ask you, at what cost?
Of course. Well, I mean, yes, you're absolutely right, Ahmed. We are at this juncture of history in which all of the theories, all the ideas, all of the concepts that we have been developing, debating, pushing for, are actually they're actualizing before our own eyes, and we see the Palestinian voice kind of coming, from the shadows and the margins and the dark spaces to be in the center of the conversation on Palestine. And we went even further than that. We said, no, it's not just the reclaiming of the Palestinian narrative that we want. We want to center the Palestinian voices that are truly representative of the struggle and the cause of Palestine. Not every Palestinian is capable of representing Palestine. I mean, our society, like any other society, has its own contradictions and its own class conflicts and its own groups that are fighting for their own interest. And just because someone may look like us and sound like us, and doesn't necessarily mean he or she is a representative of the Palestinian people. And that's kind of, I think, it's a way of those who want to marginalize Palestine, but can no longer do that, can no longer afford that during the time of genocide, are trying to kind of use these voices that do not represent the Palestinian collective and say, well, here you go. These are the very Palestinians that you wanted to center, and here they are speaking for themselves. So we have to be kind of cautious about this, especially as there's this euphoria right now of yes, maybe we should have listened to the Palestinian all along. So there's a question of what Palestinian, and how do we ensure that that Palestinian is the one that truly is conveying, representing.
It's actually very interesting what you're saying, because I've heard recently that there are some pro-Israeli, some Zionist PR organizations who are pushing some Palestinians to the media, and they have been speaking as a Gazan, as a Palestinian, but their narrative is very distorted. It feels like they're completely like Israelis.
Absolutely.
So the question is, how can we really understand who are the representative of the Palestinian voices?
So Edward Said has, he must have said something that to kind of guide us even through these times when he is not actually with us. And he spoke about the native informer. This character that, again, may look and sound like the native, but he is actually behaving against the interest of the collective interest of the native. And that's the native informer. And yes, we Palestinians, like any other colonized nation throughout history, we do have our native informers. So how do we know what the Palestinian people want, or what the Palestinian people want, and what are the priorities of the Palestinian people? During the genocide in Gaza, there was an opinion poll that was conducted in both Gaza and the West Bank that actually showed, for example, and this is one of many examples, that showed that there is greater support for the resistance in the West Bank than in Gaza. And I can imagine that in Gaza, because people are going through this collective trauma, their loved ones are being killed in very high numbers, and entire families, entire clans are being wiped out. So maybe there was a point in which people are just not hesitant to support the resistance, but bewildered. It's like being knocked on the head and you're not able to kind of make sense of any of this. So there is that sense of despair. But the West Bank actually had greater support for resistance than Gaza. So we know through opinion polls, through the collective behavior of Palestinians, through the mobilizations, through the struggles, through the everyday narrative, the kind of narrative that you create on your show. I mean, these are the Palestinians who are the organic intellectuals of Palestine, the young people of Palestine, and they are telling us in every possible platform what they stand for and what they want. And we have that. We have that unity of narrative in Palestine. I mean, I challenge those that say that Palestinians are disunited. And I say, no, absolutely not. We are very much united as a people. In fact, I don't think there is another nation that went through what we are going through in which the gap between the various classes is as narrow as
Yeah.
between us. I mean, you've seen, the rich Palestinians of Gaza City have been wiped out at the same level that the refugees of the refugee camps. But when they talk about unity in Palestine, obviously they are talking about political unity, and they are talking about, as if we Palestinians need to overcome all of our values and principles and just agree for the sake of agreeing. No, we have to agree on something. What are the values and the principles that we should agree to? We agree to the fact that Israel is a settler colonial regime that has to be resisted, and we agree to that. We agree that there can be no compromise, based on the terms imposed by Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump. We agree that the Palestinian people are the ones who are going to rule Gaza. We agree that Tony Blair, for example, is not going to be imposed as a caretaker of Gaza. We agree on so many
And we
things.
agree that Israel is our enemy, not each
Oh,
other,
absolutely,
which
absolutely.
is
And we should
which is the most
emphasize that.
important thing.
Absolutely, we should emphasize that. And this is why I feel like we need to, center the organic intellectual of Gaza. Who are the organic intellectuals of Gaza? Those are the people who remained in Gaza, fought in Gaza, died in Gaza. The hundreds of journalists who were killed, but there are hundreds who are still alive. Thousands of academics and professors and teachers and students were killed, but thousands are still alive. We need these people. They are going to be the ones who speak for Gaza, represent Gaza, choose the mode of resistance in Gaza, but at the same time also guide us through the
Yeah.
process of trying to understand the meaning of all of this and the aspirations of the Palestinian people post-genocide.
Some of the other Palestinians who live in Gaza maybe would say, okay, you're a Palestinian who lives in the US and I'm a Palestinian who lives in London. We are privileged. So who are we to decide who is to represent
Oh,
Palestine?
absolutely. I think that's a really good point, and this is why, I have, years and years ago, switched my studies, academic studies, entirely to focus on people's history, because I understand that when you live a distance away, no matter how principled you are or you think you are, at the end of the day, we kind of that distance starts affecting us and our ideas because our daily interactions, our socioeconomic privileges and situations, our geography, it's going to affect the way that we perceive our positionality within the Palestinian struggle. So as a result, I think the greatest role that we can serve as academics, as intellectuals, as journalists, as people who are keenly interested on defending the cause of Palestine internationally, is to create platforms. This is the best we can do. We are the conveyors. We are only creating platforms. We don't speak on behalf of anybody because the Palestinians, you could tell, they are
Yeah.
very good speaking on their own behalf. And I think Gaza also was this kind of, is a testament to a theory that many of us have been promoting for a long time. And that is, we don't need international media to tell us the truth of Gaza. We don't need to start a letter writing campaign to the BBC or New York Times
Yeah.
to please be a little bit kinder and slightly less biased. All we needed is to create spaces for the Palestinians to tell their own story. And what happened? Little children in Gaza. I follow children in Gaza. I promised you. There's a little girl. Her name is Maria Hannoun. I don't know if you follow Maria. She's 5 years old. She always has these angry messages to Donald Trump for some reason. She speaks beautiful English.
Wow.
And she always starts her messages with something to the effect of, listen to me, Mr. Trump, she always says. And I love it. Empowered generations. We talk about the 285 journalists who have been killed, but no, actually the conveyors of meanings and those who are responsible for the intellectual production of Gaza are not just the journalists of Gaza. Everybody is involved
normal
in the
people.
creating of meaning. And this has been done with no international journalists being allowed. And this is being done while what the people of Gaza, most of them don't speak English.
Yes.
Who translated the work and who created platforms and who amplified you and I and thousands of us worldwide? And this is our job.
Yeah.
We are the platforms so that these voices can reach the rest of the world. We are the defenders of the space that we create for them. But at the end of the day, it is their narrative.
That is very important, Dr. Ramzy, because I have always been talking about the necessity that we Palestinians, we need to create our own platforms.
Yes.
We need to create our own spaces for media and journalism, because as you have seen, we have been pressuring the Ministry of Media to platform Palestinians, but eventually, you and I, we will not be on Ministry of Media for a reason or another.
Right,
I
of
was
course.
invited a few times and then they would never call me again.
Of course.
Why? Because the narrative I have, they don't like.
Yes.
So that's why we need to create our own media platforms, which is very important. And thank you for saying that. Now, we're in Istanbul. We have been attending this Gaza Tribunal. And in your speech at the Gaza Tribunal, you decided to speak about the Palestinian resistance. Can you tell us more on why did you decide to speak about armed resistance?
Absolutely. First of all, Palestinian resistance is a legacy. It's the legacy of our ancestors. I mean, our ancestors have been resisting in Palestine from the very start. From the orchards of Ya'bad near Jenin, when Izzuddin al-Qassam took a group of men fighting against British colonialism, and every single one of them was killed in that orchard. But eventually, it led to the Palestinian uprising of 1936. And the strike of 1936. And that's particularly interesting. It started with a strike, one of the most comprehensive and effective general strikes ever conducted in the Middle East in that time in history. We're talking about 100 years ago. I mean, imagine the political consciousness that the peasants, the Fallahin of Palestine had at the time. And that legacy extended generation after generation. Gaza has been the model of resistance. From the very, very beginning, they resisted. And by the way, they resisted without ideology.
Yeah.
They were Fallahin, they started these Fidaiyin, freedom fighting groups. They just wanted to go home. They just wanted to reclaim their harvest. They were not socialists, they were not Islamists, they were not anything. They were just Palestinian Fallahin. And their flag is the Palestinian flag, and their cause is just going back and ending this diaspora. And it's not that they failed. I don't consider that failure. They just evolved. It evolved into another generation of resistors, and a third, and a fourth. And at one point, the resistance that defined Gaza was socialist. They were communists.
Yes.
And my dad was one of them, by the way. And so this is not about Hamas, and it's very, very important that we, create this distinction. You have a lot of people out there saying Hamas does not, kind of disowning Hamas. No, it's not about disowning Hamas or disowning Fatah or disowning anybody. It's about creating a distinction between resistance in Palestinian society and the various political and ideological groups that might be in or outside that realm of resistance. That's what it's all about. This way we diffuse and disarm the false Israeli hasbara and propaganda that makes this fight about Hamas. Hamas started in 1987. The Fidaiyin movement started in the late 1940s. So how do you account for that? When I talk about armed struggle, it has always been a factor. It has always been a factor. But the larger factor has always been popular resistance, meaning the everyday acts of resistance of Palestinians. And you cannot separate them. The moment you separate armed struggle from popular resistance, it's the moment that armed resistance is going to fail entirely and completely. In fact, the Gaza history is extremely relevant in that regard, because at one point the resistance movement in Gaza were very, very secretive and did not always have a connection to the populace. And Israel did manage to take them out one after the other. In fact, I do remember in the Nusayrat refugee camp when the last socialist fighter was caught, the Israeli army brought him to the martyrs' graveyard in the center of Gaza, and they asked him to kind of, reenact what he was about to do to the Israeli army. Pretend that you are throwing the grenade and so forth, and they shot him and they executed him on the spot. And that was it. That was supposedly the end of the armed resistance in Gaza. After that, we went through the process of civil society, civil disobedience, the elections of 1976, I believe, and ultimately to the first Intifada of 1987, which started as popular acts of resistance, and towards the end of it, when the world did not do anything to punish Israel, when no accountability happened, when thousands upon thousands of Palestinian children were killed, wounded, or had their arms broken, and the world did absolutely nothing, only then some semblance of armed resistance started showing up at the end of the Intifada. Second Intifada was more armed than the first one, because they felt, well, we know what happened in the first Intifada when we tried to ask for our rights peacefully, supposedly, and so forth. And so it's an evolution. It's not about Hamas, it's not about Fatah, and this is what I keep emphasizing. Emphasizing it's an evolution. But one thing is for sure, is that Palestinian agency is growing stronger and stronger. I mean, you and I began this conversation talking about taking charge of the narrative. And it is time for us to be at the center. Gaza in particular, the Gaza intellectual. I'm not being prejudiced against any other Palestinian intellectual, but believe me, you lost, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot here, but you lost your family. You can't tell me that your positionality as someone who lost many members of his family, and I lost many members of my family, that our positionality is the same of those who did not experience that kind of loss. Loved people that they will never be back. For us, it's very personal. There's this blood that has been spilled here. This is not about, we cannot reduce our struggle to slangs and chants anymore. It is extremely profound, extremely personal. And this is what makes our story far more relevant and far more central in this struggle. But again, if we are at a stage that we are actually discussing the nuances of how the Palestinian narrative should be conveyed to the rest of the world, I think we are in a very, very good stage in terms of reclaiming the Palestinian agency altogether. And the ones who ultimately reclaimed it are the people of Gaza.
Now, when we talk about armed resistance, we don't talk about Hamas or the Islamic Jihad
Absolutely
or
not.
the proscribed organizations in the
Yes.
UK and the US. That's not the question. When we talk about the armed resistance, throughout history, throughout time, always those who have been under occupation, those who have took up arms to resist, to defend themselves and to resist the occupation, they have been viewed as freedom fighters,
Yes.
as heroes.
Yes.
Now, in Palestine, if you don't join Hamas or the Islamic Jihad or the proscribed organization, and you chose to defend yourself and to resist the occupation, most likely, 100%, by the mainstream media, by the West, you will be proscribed as a terrorist organization.
Absolutely.
Why is this happening?
Okay, so when an Israeli drone is flying over Zaytun or Tufah neighborhood in northern Gaza or over Khan Yunis or Dar al-Balah, and they see a young man with a Kalashnikov, with a a Yassin 105 or any other weapon, they don't see ideology. They don't know who's an Islamist and who's secularist or who's socialist. They see a Palestinian standing and fighting for his family. This whole idea that we are fighting Islamic terrorism, why aren't they, by the way, there are many socialist fighters in Gaza. Why aren't they talking about socialism and the militant socialist? That was relevant in 1982 when Ariel Sharon wanted to sell the idea to America that this war on Lebanon against the Tanzims, they called them, the PLO, was very, very important and it's related to you, America. He said it's a war against communism.
Wow.
That was the narrative created by Israel. And the Americans marched behind them because they were trying to destroy those communist militants who were affiliated with the Soviet Union, namely the PLO. Now, that shifted because the priorities had changed and the media focus has changed. Now it's all about Islamic fundamentalism and So it's far more convenient in their point of view to create links that are not there, of course, between Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, ignore everybody else, and link them to ISIS and Taliban and Hezbollah, and everybody is the same. So this is why the fear. Just for the record, many of those who resisted colonialism, Algeria or South Africa, they were also viewed as terrorists. I think in our situation, it's just because the propaganda is so extreme, and also because the age of national liberation movements kind of passed a bit. We are still kind of the last nation fighting for its basic and fundamental rights against kind of raw classic colonialism. So because of that, like when the Algerians fought, they were relating to the people fighting in Cuba, and the Cubans to the South Africans, and the South Africans to the Vietnamese. But in the case of Palestine, it's like there's nobody more or less kind of fighting the kind of national struggle that we are fighting. So we don't have the kind of alliances that are there to help us advance the narrative on resistance. And so as a result, we kind of started taking this back position. We're always on the defensive. Okay, Ahmed, so what do you think of Hamas? Well, they kind of put you in a corner. Like the only option you could say, well, I'm not saying Hamas is good, or we didn't all elect Hamas, or you cannot reduce the Palestinian people. But at the end of the day, you are having the conversation they want you to have.
Yeah.
You are still encircled by the priorities, even though you might feel good about your answer. At the end of the day, you're still being entrapped in the dominant narrative of Western media, which is essentially entrapped by the dominant narrative of Zionism. So, what do we need to do now with the genocide? That's a brave moment. This is where the brave intellectual, we need people to stand on the front line. We need people to push against this narrative, not because we are trying to normalize violence. And by the way, not also because we need to insist that people have the right to, we need to move beyond this whole thing that people have the right to defend themselves and just say they are doing that. They are defending themselves, and nobody, especially those who did not stand up for us and did not come to our rescue, where people are living in this inferno for 2 years. A lot of people don't understand how small Gaza is. 181 square miles, 360 square kilometers. You can't actually find a spot in Gaza in which you can run a full marathon from one place to the other without having to zigzag through the refugee camp. It is that small. And you have 2.3 million people, however remained of them today, and they are living an inferno, dying alone. Nobody coming to me. Not only the Arabs did not come to our rescue, the Arabs were actually working against us to ensure that Israel is not cut off economically and that the Houthis or Ansarullah in Yemen are not affecting the Israeli economy in any way. So nobody has the moral right to come and tell us how to defend ourselves. If it's your mother's life on the line, your father's, your child, you're going to do whatever you need to do, Hamas, socialist, whatever it takes to defend your family. So we need to start normalizing that narrative without allowing them to put us in corners anymore. And we have every right now to be more brave than ever. Because if we're not brave now, are we going to wait until the next genocide? We have to take this moral stance today.
Finally, Dr. Ramzy, we are attending this conference. Before I came here, I was talking to a Palestinian friend who told me that he refuses to go to any conference on Gaza because he said it's a waste of time. These conferences, they spend a lot of money on hotels, on a travel, on a conference that is, he described it as performative. It will not have any impact on the ground in Gaza. So why are we doing it?
Absolutely, your friend is absolutely right. I share that position. I communicate that position quite often because indeed, many conferences, with all due respect to the well-intentioned people behind some of these conferences, they tend just we did something. This idea, well, at least it's something that we've done. No, I mean, if you are going to spend 120,000 euros on a conference for a weekend in which you don't even produce any content, you don't even create any mechanism, any organization, any follow-up committee, just to say we came and we did our thing and we went home. I would rather that 120,000 euro to be sent to Gaza. Donate it to UNRWA, do something with it, feed people, rebuild the school with that money. It will be far more efficient. But this particular conference is different because we are now living in an age where civil society was forced to step up for Gaza because governments are not. International institutions are not. The International Court of Justice has been, deliberating whether this is genocide or not for a long time, as if it's not obvious to everyone with a brain that this is a genocide. So what happens is civil society is stepping up. we are creating material, we are creating ideas, we are advancing the kind of discourses that are challenging Israel, Zionism, the US, Western complicity in every possible platform, reaching all the way to people actually getting into boats and going to Gaza. Not because this is really the typical role. Civil society is not created there to go and break sieges by taking these armadas and going to Gaza. Of course, everyone was arrested, beaten, and harassed, and so forth and so on. But it's civil society is now saying, you know what, enough. We have been sitting and watching this generation after generation, and not only the world has failed Gaza, but the very international laws and humanitarian laws that were handcrafted and tailored by these Western governments to protect their own interests, that are even failing to practice the most minimal amount of intervention in the case of Gaza. So civil society is pushing through. Everything that has been achieved at the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, and many, many courts and institutions is the work of civil society. All the research has been done by civil society. All the advocacy and the pressure is done by civil society. So the Gaza Tribunal is basically civil society's attempt to say, listen, ICC, ICJ, if you were to do the right thing, this is what it's going to sound like. This is a trial run for what you should be doing. This is the language that should be used. And many of these people are, in fact, involved directly with the kind of research, and I know some of them personally, that many of them are actually involved in the files at the ICJ and the ICC. So this is civil society saying that also, not only we will be involved in boycotts, not only we will be involved in general strikes like what they did in Spain and Italy, not only we will be involved in sending boats to Gaza, we will also be involved in shaping the legal discourse on Palestine. Now it is our hope, or our job rather, that we are going to push and advance this new discourse so that the ICJ and the ICC could eventually adopt it.
No. Dr. Ramzy, thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.